Good evening and welcome to another episode of Reasonable Doubt. I'm Justin Harris. I'll be with you tonight. The show, as always, is brought to you by Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association and broadcast by Houston Media Source with Mark Pirtle holding things down in the fort for us. Thanks very much, Mark. Also joining us this week is future president-elect and past president, Joe Vinas. Thanks for coming on, Joe.
Sure. How you doing, Justin?
Good, good. So we got some kind of interesting stuff going on around the county. I've noticed a lot of trials going on in the courthouse lately. Have you been seeing that too?
Yeah, there was a retrial of a death penalty capital murder case, um, and uh, when and I forget his name, got sentenced to death decades ago, I think in the '90s, and then there was a jury charge issue, a special issue. Judge Harmon was on the bench back then. Didn't give a one of the one of the critical jury charge questions, the mitigation instruction to the jury. I
Hmm.
believe that's what it was. Didn't give the mitigation instruction to the jury. They sentenced him to death. It went up on appeal. Uh, Court of Criminal Appeals reversed it, came back down, and then they just went to trial again and only on punishment. The court did not reverse it on guilt or innocence, so they only tried it on punishment and spent probably 2 or 3 weeks in trial when you consider the jury selection process. 3 weeks for that, and then I think maybe a month for or more for testimony for the state's punishment case, and then the defense's mitigation case. Jury was out 2.5 hours, and sorry, 2.5 days, and
Oh wow.
then came back and again voted for the death penalty. So I
Oh,
know the lawyers. We know all the lawyers who were on that team. Did a great job. Did everything they could for this guy. Really poured their heart and soul into. One of them was my partner Spence. So I kind of watched from the wings while he was doing all that, and along with some other really good lawyers, Alan Tanner, Kerry Hart, and John Stevenson. So he had four really
good
top-notch
team.
capital certified lawyers on his case, and I mean they did what they could, but sometimes it's just the evidence is overwhelming. So I know we can all know that the trial was conducted properly this time, and he had a good defense, and the jury just didn't agree with the defense on this one. So that just wrapped up a couple weeks ago, I think.
So is that I have a question on that? Does now that he's been resentenced again, what does that do for his appeals process? It doesn't start all over again, does it?
Uh, shouldn't be. Shouldn't. I mean, all the errors in the well on this one, yes, on this punishment phase, sure, he goes
Okay,
automatically
sure.
back up to the
Right.
Court of Criminal Appeals. But I'm no appellate
Not on the
expert.
guilt
I
innocence
even
portions of the trial. Those
right.
issues would have all been raised already and or
I mean, I
waived
didn't
if
read the
they weren't
appeal.
raised.
Right. I didn't read the appeal. They would have had. I mean, they just would have had to have been, and it got reversed on punishment. Uh, I would think that if they didn't raise any issues on guilt innocence the first time, that those have got to be waived at this point on direct appeal. Certainly not
Right.
on a habeas, but yeah, they could if there's any error in the punishment phase the second time. He'll get an automatic, as all death cases do. He'll get an automatic appeal straight to the Court of Criminal Appeals, bypass the intermediate courts of appeals, and go to that venue for his appeal. And at that point, now I have now exceeded the limits of my knowledge of post conviction capital uh, litigation. So anything after that, I don't know.
And you far exceeded mine. So um that's good. So we're just coming off of Thanksgiving. I hope y'all had a good Thanksgiving on your end of things. We had a nice one on our end. But before this, we'd been off for weeks. We hadn't been on for a while. We had a couple of shows talking about prosecutorial misconduct that was going on in Galveston County. And we were talking before the show about some of the stuff that's been coming out of Harris County with the Democratic Party, interestingly, going after their top law enforcement officer, the district attorney Kim Ogg,
Right.
right?
And
So
that's been brewing for some time. I kind of saw that story where several of the precinct chairs have voted to censure her, and basically reprimand her for uh, really not being a Democrat, uh, which to me is neither here nor there. It doesn't matter to me. To me, it doesn't matter what letters behind your name if you're a good prosecutor. But I mean, if I recall, and I don't want to get my history wrong, but Carol Vance, who was somebody who was just universally loved, and who was the DA in the late '60s, I think, and into the '70s, before Johnny Holmes, he was a Democrat, and everybody loved him. This didn't happen to him. And so they've voted a couple times. I guess they voted today, and what was it, an 11-9 vote with one person abstaining. A story it was in the news today, to proceed on with the censure, and at that point the local political rules. It's been a very long time, at least a decade, since I've looked at anything to do with local political procedures, but it gets pretty messy at this point, is my understanding. And the entire party, all the committee or all the precinct chairs from the voting precincts and around the county will get together at their next meeting, which they have quarterly. So it should, if that may be where they voted today, and they will have a full vote on whether they're going to censure her or not.
yeah, yeah, that's what this is saying. The Chronicle's reporting that they voted 11-9 to push for the admonishment. This says that, quote, accused Ogg of working against fellow Democrats, aligning with Republicans, and opposing the party's efforts to reform misdemeanor cash bail. Among the many grievances listed in the resolution, critics cited, quote, false claims Ogg has made about the other fellow Democrats, quote, defunded law enforcement, and a recent Chronicle investigation that Ogg had launched multiple criminal investigations against officials within her own party with whom she was publicly feuding. So that's, I think, what you're referring to is some of the budget fights coming from the commissioners and the county judge Lena Hidalgo's office, and between Kim Ogg's office. And there's been some, like, I think the county auditor's office has been looking into some of the DA's budget and use of the funds, which has her a little bit upset, from what I understand.
Sure, and it should be, and it's uh, something that I've said, uh, not necessarily privately, but just not in a public forum like this. But when you look at how much is being spent, first of all, it's laughable for her to say that commissioner's court is defunding her. Now, am
Right.
I going into commissioner's court's budgets and looking and seeing? No, but I did hear in the halls of, well, let me back up. So I was a prosecutor for a decade before I became a defense lawyer. So the first half of my career, I was there at that office, and actually I was there in law school, and I was there before law school. So I had 14 years of experience at the DA's office, and knew that place pretty well. Had various positions in multiple divisions throughout the office, so pretty familiar with it. And when I was a secretary in the intake division, which is completely unlike it was then. And that was really kind of the jewel of the office. That was a creation of the aforementioned Carol Vance. He created that, and it was really a model for how charges get accepted. And it worked flawlessly. Well, not as flawlessly as it can, for 30, 40 years. And then when the Ogg administration took over, they fundamentally changed it. And when I left being a secretary in intake and then being an intern for 3 years, and then went to become a prosecutor after I took the bar exam, my job as a misdemeanor 3 was to every day we'd have to come in my court, the court I was assigned to started at 8:30. I had to be at the office by 7 because I had to go through and make sure that I had all the paper files for, and I know I'm telling a little bit of I walked uphill both ways in the snow to school story here, but this is not an exaggeration. This is how it was
I
done.
remember the paper files weren't that long
Right.
ago, right? And I
Right.
remember like the three always was trudging in with the tubs, right? The tubs. Where are the tubs? Where's my tubs? Hey, don't mess up my
Yeah. Oh
tubs,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
and
The big
and they
Tupperware.
they laid out all the files, and if
Uh-huh.
you started to like pull it, some of y'all were like, well, persnickety. You start trying to
Right.
pull your client's file for their like, counsel, can you please wait till I finish? I need to put them all out and then make sure I have them all there.
Right.
Okay, go right ahead.
Let me get them all
But
in
yeah, I
perfect
remember that.
rows. Well, look,
Hmm.
when you have no authority, you're going to lord over
You
what
have
you
your
can.
control where you can.
Right. That's your fiefdom. Is that table
Yeah,
with all those paper files on it? Yeah. Yeah. It's
and
just
all the terms and conditions on the deferred adjudication for the
right.
POM.
Right. But so that was our first job. We get there in the morning and an hour and a half early and make sure that all the files were in our bucket. And if they weren't, we had to, because coordinators notoriously would add cases late in the afternoon. We'd have to go through, or an old no arrest would get arrested, and we'd have to go find it, go through our office, go through the other prosecutors' offices, the investigator's office, where the secretary stores all the files. If another division had it, we had to contact them and let them know that it was. I mean, it was just an administrative nightmare that you went through every single day. Then you get to court, and you handle your responsibilities. And really, all we tried when cases went to trial, the ones we were responsible for were DWIs, marijuana cases, and minor theft cases. And we did all that, and we made $44,000 a year, which, and I get that's 20 years ago. But today, because of diversion programs, they don't try DWIs. They don't try marijuana cases. I don't think they accept
They don't
marijuana
even
cases.
accept those charges and misdemeanor.
And for the theft cases, they have a diversion program for that. And now they have digital files, so they don't have to go looking around for those things everywhere that we were. And I know people in generations prior thought that I had it easy because our office was in the same building as the courtroom, so we didn't have to walk across the street in the rain or the snow, which it never snows in Houston, but I heard that many times, to get to court. So yeah, I had it easier than the people before me. So I'm not just trying not to be crotchety old guy here complaining about how easy these kids have it these days. But everything that was our job doesn't exist anymore. And they're making more than double what we made. I had heard, and again, I haven't verified this. I'm open to correction, but what I heard, and my jaw hit the floor. I was in court with somebody the other day, and they told me, man, these misdemeanor prosecutors now start off at $92,000 a year, which is
Yeah,
see. I mean, that's just,
that's
I can't believe that. That's when I came out of school, that's what big firms were paying,
mhm.
people who were on law review to go work for them. And so, it's just, I couldn't believe it. Uh, and they're paying, there have always been in the county garage, there's always been spots for the higher, I mean, the DA, the first assistant, and maybe the DA's executive administrative assistant all have parking spots in the sub basement of the CJC. They all park in the building, but everybody else, the bureau chiefs,
Who
the
all is it again? It's the
yeah,
DA and who?
I think it's the DA. I think it's the first assistant. I think it's the
Mhm.
DA's executive administrative assistant. Actually, I think that one might not be there, and maybe the chief investigator. She's got a few spots assigned to her in that garage,
Okay.
and so
I've never seen this garage even. I've had a
yeah,
couple judges
yeah.
show me that they'll like show me sometime, but
Oh
I've
no,
heard
yeah,
there
you
and
can't get there.
I see where the cars come out,
Yeah,
but I've
you
never even
cannot get
seen
there.
the parking garage. It's
Yeah,
underneath the courthouse. It's like this, like a crypt, that
right. I've only been down there because I think maybe, and I can't remember why, I was helping somebody. Maybe there was like a Christmas party in a courtroom, and I was helping like the court coordinator. The judge let the coordinator park her car there that day because she was going to bring all this stuff up. So I went down and helped her
oh
bring
yeah, to
stuff
help
up.
carry
So I've,
stuff up.
I'm one of the few people. I'm like Indiana Jones. I was in
Yeah.
the
You got to
the
go in the
tomb for a
tomb.
while. Yeah, but So they've got a few spots there, and then they've always had, bureau chiefs, division chiefs, and district court chiefs, and those levels. And investigators have assigned spots, or not assigned spots, just spots in the county garage. Now there's another layer on top of that, felony twos, and there's, I don't know, that's another 35 or 40 people that have parking spots now. And I'm not criticizing
That's a
them.
lot.
They work hard. Yeah, they work hard. They do it. They defer. They try. That's the meat and potatoes of the office. They try, for the most part, the hardest cases. Although now they don't try the murders anymore. The chiefs try the murders. But they've got all these sexual assault of a child cases and intox manslaughters. That felony two is a very difficult spot. If they have another fringe benefit that I didn't have, good for them. But as you just said, that's a lot of people. That's a lot more money. And I read, and they've been doing this for a while. A couple of weeks ago, she submitted to Commissioner's Court a request to be able to just give them basically a stipend for, I think it's $125 a month, what the county's paying now, so that they can choose their own garage. And in the budgetary request, the DA's office said that the Harris County DA's office cannot recruit or retain prosecutors because parking is an important benefit to working in a downtown law firm. So that's an instance where it's not because the morale is terrible at the office. We can't get people to come here.
Yeah, no.
Keep people because they don't have parking spots. Well, that's nonsense. Because
man, we've been talking about this for months, Joe. Like, what is going on with morale at the office? No one ever talked about the parking problem. I mean, this is it. Mark, we got to mark this point in the show. This needs to be like a flag on YouTube, like one of the parts that it jumps to. We solved the morale problem. It's they'd have to pay for their own parking. Huh.
This is the
that must be why morale is so bad in my office, because like I have to pay for my own parking.
Exactly.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
So
not only that,
okay.
There's a special prosecutor that we've heard about. And again, I haven't checked the records on this, but rumor has it that the DA's office is paying a contract special prosecutor who's a civil lawyer who used to work at the DA's office, and they're paying her $400 an hour to do what a prosecutor should do.
What's she specially prosecuting?
No idea, but her name.
I mean, that's good. $400 an hour is what a good, competent, well-experienced lawyer should be billing out.
Right.
And that's what they bill out in those big law firms. Or if you get to be like Rusty Hardin or Dan Cogdell or somebody like that. But that's my billable rate, by the way. I just have never actually passed that on to anybody.
Well, and it may be your billable rate or my billable rate to clients who want to pay us that.
Right, private clients.
But it's not what the county pays us. It's not what the county pays other prosecutors. It's not what the county pays county attorneys. It's probably not even what the county pays MEs or the commissioners. So why is this one person getting $400 an hour to do what somebody who's making $30 an hour should have to do? That's the question.
That sounds kind of like, if you're the county judge and you give like a friend a contract for COVID who doesn't have a whole lot of experience in it and doesn't work in that field.
Right.
Okay. So, back to that, one thing that we mentioned earlier is, so you've got Kim Ogg is upset that she feels like her budget's being squeezed. She's been going for years to the commissioners asking for more money, and they've said, we don't know that you're managing what you have well, and they're not giving you more. Somehow she's squeezing more money out of somewhere to pay the DAs a high amount and pay for more parking of the DAs in order to keep them. This just seems like a lot of money that the taxpayers are doing for Kim Ogg to keep her staff happy with her.
Right. It's what I refer to as the Kim Ogg tax, is what it is.
Okay. I was hoping you'd use that term. I didn't want to put it back in your mouth.
No, yeah. It's, and I meant to say it earlier and I rambled. it's we are subsidizing the fact that the prosecutors are unhappy. And even though the taxpayers are subsidizing that, the prosecutors are still leaving. I mean, I've got people in my office, 3 or 4 people this year who are district court chiefs who have come, who are now renting office space from us, and they're happier than they've ever been. And these are people that I didn't ever want to leave the DA's office because they were good people, they're smart, and you want to have, even as a defense lawyer, you want these people to be there, not just as a citizen, so that you know that that people who are truly guilty of terrible crimes are being punished for them, but as a defense lawyer, and what people don't realize is it's better for us to have good, competent prosecutors, because those are the people who can smell out these terrible cases,
the bad case,
and they'll get rid of them. And so if we have somebody who's not guilty, or the police violated the law in executing an illegal search like Harding Street, then these good, solid people will get rid of those cases and say, look, you know what? When you're right, you're right. Case closed. It's out. Maybe I'll get them next time. Maybe not. Who knows? But they're leaving in droves. And so it's just.
I sent an email to one today who I'd been emailing like a couple of weeks ago about a case. Who's regularly like, hey, checking on this. Have you got this? Have you got this? And today it bounced back and said either the email address you entered is invalid or the person is no longer employed in the office. And I'm like, well, I just hit reply to their last email, so I didn't get the email address wrong. So we're going to go with option 2, which is kind of funny, right? Like that's the automated message from the DA's office now, is either you typed in like Joe, JEO _ Venus at dao.htx.net, or they got fired or they quit. I mean, like very recently. And you're right. I've seen it's almost like a wave. You say droves, it's almost like waves. And recently there's been a few people I've been like, oh, hey, how's it going? And then they get off the elevator and we're just chit chatting, we get into court, and then they like stand next to me to like talk to the prosecutor. I'm like, what are you doing down here? Like, oh, I'm on the defense bar now. What? When? Like last week. Oh, okay. Shit, don't go look at the listserv and see the things that I've said about you in the past.
I had a prosecutor come up to me, and I thought we were going to have a conversation about a case, who approached me in the courthouse the other day and said, hey, we need to talk. I said, sure, what's up? And started to ask me about, what I did when I left the office. And I'm like, not you too. So it's not stopping. I don't even see it slowing down. I mean, it's unrecognizable at this point. And I don't, if there are any prosecutors watching, I'm not saying that all the good ones have left. They haven't. There are still some really good prosecutors there. And what's crazy is there are some really good prosecutors there who are 3 or 4 levels ahead of where they should be because of all the people who have left. But they're doing a good job. It used to be the office was full of people like that.
Sure.
And you don't have to go.
Well, you have a couple problems, right? You can have this kid who's like an excellent straight A student in like upper level classes in 5th grade, doing great, right? Teachers all say good marks, no problems. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, you know what? Instead of 6th grade next year, let's take you to 10th grade. There you go.
Right.
Now, like they're not going to do as great. And it's not because they're not a smart kid. It's just that you've kind of thrown more at them than they're ready for. You have that going on, but you also have, there's always that, right, Joe? That's kind of how the practice of law really works, is that like you try something, you're like, oh, that didn't go so well. I'm not going to do that next time, right? And you just like kind of feel bad for those clients that you learned on. But and we don't talk about them. But
but here's the thing, you do that when you're handling lower level cases.
Exactly. And you have people like Joe Vinas and Troy McKinney and all of the mentors that we can go to and say, hey, how do I handle this case? How do I approach this? How many times David Ryan mentored me? I can never count when I was a baby lawyer. I still go to him for advice on things. But when you don't have that you can just like walk down the hall to, or there's this gap, right?
Mhm.
I feel like there's maybe this gap in that office of like a lot of young blood and some really old blood that's like up in the offices that never, they maybe pass in the elevator and they're too intimidated to ask for advice on a case. But that's really important, is being able to brainstorm and talk about stuff. I don't know how much of that goes on in that office, because go out just across the hall sometimes and it's like they don't know what is just happening in each other's courtrooms.
Yeah, it's
So
like I said, it's unrecognizable. It's not the same place it was.
yeah, um,
And you
this
look at the cases they
censure,
choose to prosecute, like
right?
you know, Arkema after Hurricane Ike, when their plant gets leveled and they get prosecuted for an environmental crime, which was ridiculous. Or the doctor, and I've just blanked on his name, at Memorial Hermann, when they had the COVID vaccines and one was going to
Oh
go
yeah,
to waste, he was going to have to throw it in the trash. So instead of doing that, he used it on the only person who was around, and he tried to find other people. Nobody else would take it, so he gave it to his wife. So they charged him with
right.
theft. That's, I mean, and it's ridiculous,
It
the
is,
things that they do.
and this censorship stuff that's going, censorship, but the censure that the Democratic Party is considering against Kim Og, it um, it wouldn't have any actual effect on her ability to hold office, but it is kind of what we were talking about before, something that's never really happened before.
Right.
I have no memory of this happening on a local scale, much less on a larger scale.
No,
Um,
I mean, and I've been around this community for 20, almost 25 years, about a month shy of 25 years. And so not only did it not happen in that period, but I was around with people who were practicing in the 60s, and I never heard of anything like this. So my institutional memory kind of goes back not only beyond my time at the office, but before I was born. And I've never heard of this. This is crazy. And of course, that we've heard already, and we'll continue to hear that it's not her fault, and people are just being meanies to her, which is hilarious.
well, her office, let's see, what the statement said. Her statement said a narrow vote of 11 to 9 resolution committee insiders does not represent the Democratic voters of Harris County. A few partisan extremists will never subvert the rights of voters in the upcoming March primary. I trust the people of Harris County to base their vote in the upcoming election on facts, not lies and misinformation propagated by my opponent and his supporters. So she's doing a really good, and that's her campaign statement. She's doing
right,
a really good job of turning this thing, saying it's not it is a political thing. I'm not political. They're being political, and now she's dragging Sean Tier into this. And
right.
I don't know Sean Tier that closely or not or that well at all, but Sean Tier doesn't really strike me as like a lifelong or super strong Democrat any more than Kim Og strikes me as one, right?
Well, one of
So
them has run as a Republican in the past, and
right,
it wasn't the one named Sean Tier, by the way.
right. And so it's and I also, there's some really weird like undertones in this. A few partisan extremists will never subvert the rights of voters in the upcoming March primary. Um, it almost feels a little Trumpian and like a call, like I won even though the numbers aren't
Right,
for me. They're just some begrudged people. Well, like that's how democracy works. If
right.
it's 11 to 9, and yeah, one of those 9 shifted over, that resolution wouldn't have passed. But that's how democracy works. If one of those 9 a partisan extremist, as you say, you got to make sure that if you're in that party, you're keeping your house in order and your ducks in a row, and you're not angering the other 8 nonpartisan extremists, right?
Well,
So
I'll tell you this. I can tell you, and I don't know anything about local Democratic politics. I've never been a Democratic Party insider, but 12 years ago, I did run for judge as a Republican. And that was the same time I ran in 2012. That was the same time that Pat Likas was running for reelection for DA and Mike Anderson was her challenger.
Mm.
That was a very bitterly contested uh, primary. I mean, it was line in the sand. You pick one, and it wasn't by him, uh, but it was a line in the sand. It's you're on my side. You know, you're with me or you're against me, and that was kind of how we felt. And I hadn't felt that ever before being there. Uh, and so, but even then, even in that very hotly contested primary, and you had a guy who was an established figure in the Republican Party and Mike Anderson, which Sean Tier is not. Like you said, you know, you don't think he's a lifelong Democrat. I don't. I mean, I know Sean pretty well. I've never had a political conversation with him. I don't know his politics, but I know he's not a really lifelong or an entrenched figure in the local Democratic Party like Mike Anderson was. Mike Anderson had been a judge
In the
for
Republican
a decade.
Party.
Right. Sorry.
Right.
He had been a judge for 10 years, a very popular judge, had been approached to run for various other offices, had been approached to run for DA before this, and had turned it down and then ran against her. And even there, where you had a very, very popular uh, opponent and someone who was known, and it was easy to take his side over hers because there were some morale problems in the Likas office too, not nearly to the extent that there are now, but she did a much better job of retaining most of the office when she took over. I mean, she got rid of some of the people who were very, very close to her main opponent, including our current president. Uh, but she kept most people there and let us essentially do our job. Uh, but there were some morale problems. And when Mike Anderson came in to run, I sat in meetings and listened to speeches by political insiders who said, look, what's best for the party is she is the top of the ticket locally. She's the DA. She's what brings people out. We as a party need to rally around her, stay with her. And you know, Mike Anderson may be a great DA, but we're going to rally around Pat Likas. That would be much more likely of a scenario for his followers to pull something like this. So it's interesting that she says that when there was a very similar race back in 2012 and somebody who was more well known than Sean Tier, and that's Mike Anderson, was
Party
running against
insight.
Likas.
Yeah, so you're
Right.
saying that
And
Sean Tier probably doesn't have like the political machine already constructed within the local Democratic Party to pull the strings to get those 11 votes and make, you know, from behind the scenes,
right.
make his opponent look bad.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there
Exactly.
because, and yeah, like I said, I don't know Sean Tier's personal politics, but that's kind of an indication that they're not deeply entrenched one way or the other. And to the point that he's like a party operative or an insider. So
right.
Yeah, but it's interesting to see her just turn this. That's as a someone with a political science background, it's a brilliant twist on this on the political, and it's a great response. You know, I lost that vote. It just was
right.
I barely lost it. You know, like that's true. That's true. You barely lost. You did lose, but
Yeah.
and interestingly, at the same time,
right.
there was another vote. I was trying to see what the vote was actually on. Another measure. It said supporting OG failed with 6 people in favor of that, 13 opposed, and then there's that one abstention. So I don't know. It's the vote count there is weird. That's 19 and 1 is 20, but then 11 and 9 and 1 is 21. So I don't know. Maybe there wasn't the abstention the second time. I thought that there was one abstention. Yeah. So I don't know. But it's funny. I don't know what the measure supporting OG did, like how it supported her. Just said she's one of us. I mean, that's kind of a weird thing to say, but yeah, I think this is an interesting thing that's happened. It's a very bizarre, sorry, a very bizarre kind of twist on the local politics thing, like the party coming after their own, you know. And I gotta say, even as a Democratic supporter, it's a little frustrating to see this party just continually eat itself. Um, but that's what they're doing, and they're doing it very publicly. So,
Right. We've seen it on both
um,
sides, nationally and locally, where they just, I mean, we just saw it with the Republicans getting rid of the Speaker of the
mhm.
House in Congress for really no reason, um, and leaving the nation without, you know, the third ranking official in Washington. So yeah, it's
Well, that's the crazy thing is Republicans don't do that. That's what
well, we
Democrats do. Democrats
just
will
did
like
though,
go out and
yeah.
have a big fight in the front yard, and like, and then the neighbors are out there like, oh, why are y'all doing? We have fights just like that, but we do it inside the house. That's what
Right,
the Republicans usually do. So yeah, what happened with Speaker McCarthy being ousted like that by Matt Gaetz was unheard of at the time, mainly because like the Republicans don't do that. And Democrats continually do this, but it's never happened like this. I don't know. Like you said, it's still got a procedural mess to go through. I think there's like another vote this weekend on Saturday. Then on the 12th, there's like a vote from all the precinct chairs. I think what I saw is it said who are present. So that's going to be, a bunch of like busting the the chairs. There's going to be a lot of butt kissing on both sides of people trying
sure,
to get the precinct chairs to either stay home or go in.
right.
Um, but I'm looking at some notes I have here, and were you or was somebody else in this meeting where somebody from the DA's office kind of warned some of the judges um, that they better fall in line with DA's thing or
Yeah,
else? Because
no, that was me. I was there. It happened in December of 2020, I think. There was a big, I don't think it was 20, it was December. It's the end of the year. And I think it was 20, it may have been, I think it was 2020, it may have been 2021. But the the point of the meeting was supposed to be there was a big talk about and it had to have been 2020 because Mark Thiessen was the president of HCCLA. And so
okay,
he was invited, the judges invited him, and he couldn't stay the whole time. So he asked me to come in uh, and take over for him when he left. And so I was there the whole time. I did speak some, but what I thought the meeting was, and what we were told the meeting was that we were going to discuss the logistics of how we were going to conduct trials during the pandemic. As you may remember, I don't know, I shouted it from the rooftops. I was very, very anti NRG for many
yep,
reasons. I thought there was no way we could ever get a fair trial, and frankly, neither could the state. But that's their problem, not mine. But there was no way we could get a fair trial when you have, jurors super far away from you. You can't even see that there's a human being sitting in that seat.
behind that podium,
Yeah, and
they
they've
have
got a mask
the
on and a
reflective
face shield. Yeah,
screens
yeah,
and the
and
masks.
so
Yeah,
I mean, it was so bad that I was juror number, I think, 38, and I got called to NRG, and I sat there, and the judge conducting this capital murder trial. I knew the prosecutor, I knew the defense lawyer, I knew the judge, and the judge asks introduces everybody and says, "Does anybody here know any of us?" And I raised my hand. This judge, I've known this judge. She was a professor of mine in my criminal trial ad class at my third year in law school in 2002. I was assigned to her court in 2005. I know her well, and I've tried many cases in front of her. I see her all the time. I would never call her by her first name, but she calls me by my first name all the time, and I love her to death, respect her a lot. And when I
he
raised
knows
my
you.
hand, it was Belinda
Yeah,
Hill. Um,
yeah. I
and
think I knew who you were talking about. Yeah,
yeah, and so I mean, she's fantastic. Everybody loves her. And
I love
so
Judge.
uh,
She's
and
tough,
so I raised
tough,
my
but I
hand.
love her.
She looks at me and she looks down at her list and she's flipping through and she counts and she's like, "Oh, Mr. Venus." I mean, I am the middle juror.
Yeah,
I am center juror.
38, 38 out of
And I've known
65.
this woman. Yeah, I've known her for 20 years, and she did not know who I was. And my opinion is that right there, you can't
Mm-hmm.
even recognize somebody you've known for a long time. There's no way you can effectively pick a jury. Anyway, I've rambled again. So we're in this meeting discussing that, and then, and I won't name names here, but one of the judges was saying something, and we were all on Zoom, and it was the Hollywood Squares Zoom where you could see everybody, and then uh, they started the DA all kind of took over the meeting and was saying, okay, we're here to talk about what y'all need to do to fix the problems you've created because your bail is too low. And she just starts going off on the judges, and then she said, all right, I'm going to turn it over to some of my staff members. And a very, very, very senior staff member started in on the judges and was saying, look, I'm going to get part of this quote wrong, but I know the key word, I know it for a fact, said, if you don't get in line, or if you don't do this, you don't start raising bails, there's going to be a reckoning, is exactly what this member of the DA said. Reckoning, that is the key word. And one of the judges popped in and said, whoa, I don't appreciate being threatened like that. And you could see one by one cameras turning off by all the judges, because I'm sure they didn't want their reactions on video, but I couldn't believe it.
Well, so that's what this thing that the Democratic Party seems to be looking at is like, is she like making a reckoning for her people who are her political opponents, right?
Right. That was the thing last political cycle. Was it became a story that all these prosecutors were running for benches against sitting judges
that were
party.
not following in line.
That was unheard of. I mean, I remember in 2008, there was Judge George Godwin retired. He was in the 174. He retired. 4 prosecutors, senior prosecutors, put in for his bench because you didn't run against a sitting judge, especially one that was of the same party as the DA. It was John Jocker, who's now a very senior federal prosecutor, Terrence Wyndham, who was a division chief at the time, Bill Moore, another division chief, and Kevin Keating, all put in, and he's at the PD's office now. All 4 of these guys, and I mean, it was, who do you vote for? You got 4 really good choices. I like them all. They're all very smart, and I like them all personally, but you didn't have that this last cycle. You had what, half a dozen or more, probably a dozen prosecutors running for benches under a Democratic DA.
They all won, right?
Most of them did win, yeah.
I'm trying to think right now. Did anybody that she ran from her office not beat the incumbent that she challenged?
We know the 184th and 185th. 208th did not come out of her office.
14 wasn't with the DA's office then. Let's see. I guess they ran somebody in 2 and the Republicans won there. Yeah, and that's the other thing is that the Democratic Party also should look at is that the seats where they lost, the benches that they lost, at least in the misdemeanor courts, I don't think they lost any benches in the district courts, but the seats that they lost.
Yeah, it's now Kat Thomas is the judge
in the yeah, but she's still a Democrat, right?
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying.
I'm talking about like in court 2, in court 3, in court 14, they went from democratically held seats to now Republican held seats. Right. The Democratic Party should also recognize that Kim Ogg unseated the incumbent in the primary.
Right.
And then the Republicans defeated the challenger who unseated the incumbent in the primary. So we lost like Judge Singer, Judge Bynum, Judge Bowman, we should have had Portia as the judge in court 3. Judge Geis was in there, I think, as an interim appointment. But anyway, it just reminded me of that conversation that you had been part of, that meeting you had been part of, and the reckoning that was kind of worn down.
That was unusual. I mean, that was such a big deal. That made Texas Monthly. They heard about that and ran a story on that several months later. But some of the other, I won't say that because you never know who's going to get a search warrant. Nah, just to protect
Ah,
people. I had conversations with people who were in that meeting, who are not judges and not defense lawyers, who were shocked by some of the behavior that had gone on there. And that will remain in the vault. I will never ever give up that. But
respect
uh,
that. I appreciate you telling us, but I
uh,
respect that you want to keep your sources anonymous.
yeah, it was bad. And I mean, not to say that if you're a prosecutor and you want to be a judge, you have to wait to run against, hey, you have to wait for an open bench, or you have to run, for the opposing party of your boss. I don't care about any of that, but it seemed to be a concerted effort, um, from
Oh, it was
inside.
very concerted. Like there was judges that they didn't challenge and judges that they did,
Right.
and it was
For these
people
two
who they
felony
felt like were
judges,
rocking the boat for the DA's office.
it could be. And I mean, we lost a couple of judges, in felony court to now former prosecutors. And I mean, I the two judges that we lost were friends of mine. I thought they were doing a good job, on their bench. Um, and then these two prosecutors have come in, and I've had little experience with them. They seem to. I hear they're doing well. I hope they're doing well. I like them as individuals, but and I hope they continue to do that. I just don't have an experience. I haven't been in those two courts yet, and it seems like I should have been. It's been almost 2 years, but it seemed weird, when all that happened. It's never happened before, and now all of a sudden, one of two things happened: either Og encouraged and orchestrated this, or someone in her administration did, or that many people are that unhappy being prosecutors that this was the landing spot. They chose to run for office, which is not an easy thing to do. I mean, it's a great job to have, but it's the worst application process there is.
Exactly.
And that many people chose to leave at the same time because the conditions in that administration are that caustic. And so,
They didn't get free parking.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean
right.
it's clear they didn't
So
get free.
either either option's not good for this DA. Whether they left because they don't like to be there, or they left because she was encouraging them to run against these other judges. And these aren't like people who have been at the office for 10, 15, 20 years. And so it's time, they want to be a judge. And these people barely, uh, met the statutory minimum to run for the bench. Some of them, not all of them.
Oh yeah, there was somebody that was like working in her office that like what was it? They'd have to maybe they didn't actually throw their hat in, but they wouldn't have been licensed long enough as of the date of the election. They'd only be licensed long enough as of the date that they'd be sworn in 2 months later.
Right.
Um, and that's on a misdemeanor court. I mean, there were some people who were running to be able to handle capital murder trials that I was kind of like, you kind of biting off a lot there. I hope you can chew it all.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but and the kind of the crazy step back thing about this is we're sitting here talking about people who are supposed to like be totally objective and totally
Mhm.
neutral in their application of the law, consistent and fair, whatever those things mean. And yet we're assigning political parties for them and they're having to run like popularity contests. And they
Right.
can't, the crazy thing is they can't come out and tell the voters, like, vote for me and this is how I will be a judge. Like they have to
Right.
come out and you campaign on this. You have to come out and say, like, I can talk about everything except for what I'll do in the job that I'm asking you to vote for me to do.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's
It's
nuts.
scary. Yeah. I mean, and what, I mean, the DA, the sheriff, the judges, they should not have letters behind their name. It ought to be an independent
Yeah, the
entity.
mayor of Houston and
Right.
like the city council members can't,
Right.
but
Right.
the judges can, these
Right.
neutral
And judges and
arbiters
the
of
DA and the
justice.
sheriff, they're supposed to be above the fray. And I'm not saying that they as individuals are not. Uh, I'm not saying that at all. But if you're independent,
It's hard.
you don't
It's
with
easier
these
to act
positions.
like you're independent if you
Right.
don't have a D or an R or even a
Right.
capital I behind your name. You
Right.
know,
It's so I'm all for electing judges. I'm not a super big fan of the appointment retention election system, but, um, yeah, do it as independence. The best system I've heard is actually from one of our members, a guy named Todd Leffler, is you take, let's say you've got, how many felony courts do we have now? 26. Let's just say all 26 are up for election at the same time, which they're not, but all 26 are up for election. Then everybody gets on the ballot in whatever order, because you have to draw to see what order you get on the ballot. Everybody gets on the ballot. The top 26 candidates, those are the top 26 vote
Those are
getters,
the judges.
those are your judges. And if they are a current judge, well, they just keep their bench. But if they're a new judge, you just fill them in.
You just plug them in alphabetically by number.
Yeah, that way you don't get where we've seen in the past where you have to choose between two really, really good people for one bench, and you have two not so great candidates for another. When you wish, man, I wish I could flip flop one of these candidates.
Exactly.
And
why can't Chris Morton? Why can't I live in a county with Chris Morton and Brad Hart as district court judges?
Right. And there, Josh Hill and Kristen Guinea in the 232nd.
Yeah, there's enough district courts that need good judges.
Right. And so, anyway, that's, I'm not going to get that wish, but
we're preaching to the choir. We're both on the same page there.
Yeah.
I have this question here that I wrote earlier that I want to get to, but I don't want to like do it too soon, and I don't want to do it too late, and then you don't have enough time to think about it. But I've been kind of thinking about this, like what is Kim Ogden doing? Right? Like what if she's not out there seeking political revenge, and she's done all these diversion programs, at least in misdemeanor courts, and I have gotten some diversions and interventions in felony court even that I don't know would have happened a while back, but I'm trying to think of the changes in what we deal with every day, other than there's no more paper files, and so therefore there's not really even an open file policy anymore. Unless you're going to give me your laptop and let me click through, it's not an open file policy. No. Other than that, there's not like mandatory 4-month jail sentences on BMV misdemeanors. You still don't get like deferred recs on ag robberies and burglary of habitations and stuff like that generally, but you get a little bit more agreement to go to the judge without an agreed recommendation. They file a lot more, it seems like, violation of protective order cases, but they don't prosecute them as hard as they used to. So there's some changes there, but like what kind of contributions, good or bad, and that she has cleared out a lot of people, and it's going to be good or bad depending on which way you see it. You mentioned earlier when she came in, she made a bunch of changes. She also fired like 41 people before she even took office, right? So what are some contributions that you see that after Kim Ogg's time is over? And I don't know if we're at the beginning of the end right now or not. I don't know if this is going to be good for Sean Tier or better for Kim Ogg or what, or another person coming into the race. Anybody watching or listening, if anybody else wants to throw their hat in and give people some options. Yeah, like maybe a progressive Democrat. That would be kind of cool. But have we ever had a non-white DA? Or they all been white? Because the ones you've mentioned going back to before Johnny Holmes were all
Carol Vance.
Vance.
I think they've all been Caucasian.
Maybe we could have like a non-white DA. And
like Reginald McCamey ran for DA against Chuck Rosenthal in 2004. Clarence Bradford ran in 2008. I don't remember Hispanic candidate. I'm sure there had to have been some at some point. I don't remember any.
Maybe, yeah.
But that's it. I mean, yeah. But
what kind of contributions do you think what is Kim Ogg doing? What has she done for Harris County other than, have to reach into our wallets and pay her staff more and give them free parking to keep them from leaving, and they keep leaving? What has she done? Good, bad, or ugly? What do you think?
I think if you want to make, we've been talking about, and you and I, among all of our brothers and sisters on this side of the bar, have been blamed for the case backlog since COVID, or since Harvey, right? Everybody, they blame it on these things, and then they turn to us. If I am DA on day one, what I do is something I mentioned earlier, and that is revert intake back to what it was.
Mhm.
Intake was created as a rotating position where regular court prosecutors go there after work. You work the 5 to midnight shift, or you work the midnight to 8 shift. And then there were some regular people during the day, but they constantly rotated. And so you had people make, and that sounds like that's a silly thing to say, but when you think about it, in Harris County, anytime somebody's arrested for a class B misdemeanor all the way up to a capital felony, it goes through the DA's office. Most of
Mhm.
that goes through the intake division. I mean, almost all of it. There are some specialized divisions that handle their own, but almost all of it goes through intake. And so you had trial court prosecutors who were at intake making decisions, not just, okay, let me check off a little box. Are all the elements of the crime there? Do I think there's probable cause? Yeah, go ahead and file it. Let the court prosecutors figure it out, because they don't have to worry about it. When you're a trial court prosecutor and you're working intake, you've got skin in the game. There is a chance that file ends up on your desk or ends up on your
Right.
friend's desk. And you've got to explain to them why you took that case. And you've got to get up there and defend to your boss, when they're reading that file, who took this? You took this case? What is wrong with you? So you always had that in the back of your mind. And you maybe you had tried a case very similar to this, and you could tell the officer who was right there at the scene, hey, go get this evidence, go talk to this person, make sure you've got all these things done, and call me back. And if I'm gone,
Right.
talk to the person who's replacing me in 3 hours, and I'll catch them up to speed. And so you had people who knew what they were doing because they were constantly still doing it, uh, uh, you know, right there. So you fix intake, and I think you fix many of the problems that we have in the criminal justice system. To me, that's the worst thing
We
she's
only
done.
have we have less than a minute left, and we talked about that before. Is the intake change? Why do you think she does it this way?
I think it was a budgetary move. That way they're not paying these prosecutors overtime to work, and
Oh,
so
that's
these
right, because that's
prosecutors
why a
are
lot
just
of people want to do it.
salary.
Is they got the overtime hours
Well, because
working that night
now
shift.
that they do that, now she has an armored car she can drive around in, and she's got her own personal bodyguard
Right.
staff that we pay for, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's where that money went.
What's she
So,
doing that
so
she needs a bodyguard that we also have to pay for, right? Like, I don't know. I guess maybe we could save a little bit of money if there was a different DA in there that people just didn't want to kill so badly. But so we're getting about to get the 30-second mark um flashed at us. There it is. So Joe, thank you for coming on. I think this was a good conversation, and I want to continue. So there's still more information that's going to happen with this censure vote that the Democratic Party is doing. There's more that's going to be coming down about the investigations that her office is doing that's getting this whole thing riled up. So I'd like to continue this conversation sometime in the future. But I do appreciate you
yep.
coming on with us tonight, and talking to us about this, and all the other things that we've got going on down at the Criminal Justice Center. So on behalf of Reasonable Doubt and Joe, you can take us out on behalf of HCCLA. Mark, thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
And that was a weak close.